Hi, I'm Ananya. I'm a junior content manager with Trip 101. Today, we're discussing an exciting location, something that I'm personally very excited about because I want to visit this destination. It's Vietnam, which is a hot favorite for many Indians, I think, right now. And joining me is Aditi, who's presently in the beautiful Indian state of Goa. So, welcome to this session with us, Aditi. I'm excited to know a little bit more about you first, and then let's deep dive into Vietnam, the destination you traveled.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on your series. My name is Aditi. I work as a software engineer, and right now I work remotely, so that allows me to travel around the world. So I like to travel on my own mostly. I do like to travel with people, but it's not always possible to coordinate. I like to travel really slow. When I get to a place, I like to just be there for a while, go to the grocery shop, get some stuff, and talk to the locals. That's not always possible on a 1 week trip. For that reason, I usually travel solo, but I travel with friends as well sometimes.
And you post about your travels on Instagram as well, right? You have a special love for beaches, I think, because your handle states that.
Yeah, I think I've just accepted the fact that no matter where I go, I look for the nearest beach, and that's where I'll be. I'm sort of focused on that. That all around the world, I'll probably just be covering the beaches.
That's quite fun. And that's like, it makes selecting a vacation spot easier as well because
Yeah.
you know where you're going. Yeah. So tell us about your trip to Vietnam. When did you go?
I went to Vietnam 2 years ago, I think August 2022. The reason I picked Vietnam was Southeast Asia is so much closer to India and flights were cheap. And when I started looking more into Vietnam, I realized that it's actually a huge country. It's almost the vertical size of India. It takes a very long time from Saigon to Hanoi. Vietnam has a lot of beaches, an interesting culture. The more I started looking into it, the more I started finding places that haven't been explored that much, but are actually really interesting. I've seen those places getting more popular among travelers. So it's an interesting place to go to.
Yeah, for sure. So how long were you there? What was the duration of your
Trip, it was about 10 to 12 days, I think. This was just my first trip to Vietnam. So I went from the south end of Vietnam, which is Saigon, to Hanoi, so south to north.
And did you also explore some beach towns while you were there, or were you mostly in the interiors?
I did. I went to this beach town called, I think it's closer to Saigon. It's not that popular, but it's a very small beach town. Then there is Hoi An and Danang, which is very popular, both of them. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about that. I think we'll cover that as well. And Vietnam is famous for Halong Bay,
Hmm.
which is seen in a lot of movies. That they have a night cruise there, and there are some islands. And yeah, so a lot of beach exploration around Vietnam as well.
We'll discuss more about what you did when you were in Vietnam. But first, I'd like to know, did Vietnam live up to your expectations when you were doing your research? How did it turn out to be?
I don't think I went with too many ideas about what Vietnam would be like, but it did surprise me. At the end of the day, the place becomes about the people. A lot of the people actually in Vietnam, they don't speak English that much, so you have to use Google Translate a lot. It's a very nice, welcoming country. A lot of people are very helpful, even though you cannot speak their language. It was actually full of surprises for me because there was just not much to go off about Vietnam. Thailand or Bali, you hear a lot about these destinations, but you don't hear that much about Vietnam. So really, I was just being surprised the whole time.
That's a fun experience to have. I also noticed that you described your trip of 10 to 12 days as a short trip. So, what are your usual trip lengths?
My usual trip length is as long as the country would let me stay.
And you mentioned that you work remotely. So, when you're traveling, do you usually work alongside your
Yeah.
travels as well?
Yeah, usually I do have to. That's another reason why I have to travel slow somewhat because I do have to work during the day. I will go to a place, then I'll settle down. Then I do have my regular calls and work and all of that during the day. And side by side, I'm exploring the location in the evenings or on weekends, holidays, all of that.
I quite like that. And then, yeah, that you work during the day and then you take your time to explore at your own pace as if you're almost like settling into life as a local in that destination. And then also seeing it from the eyes of a tourist and a traveler.
Yeah.
So let's go back to August, the month that you traveled in. Was it a good time to be in Vietnam? What was the weather like when you went?
August, yeah, it was a good time. So I remember when I researched the temperature and the weather in Vietnam seemed very similar to India. And even while being there, I don't really remember noticing any particular difference or being uncomfortable in any way. The weather was very similar to India in August, at least. It was raining a little bit in Hanoi. For that time, I think the weather was not an issue for me. Vietnam does get a little cold during December, I think. Hanoi especially does. That's actually not a bad thing because most of Southeast Asia is really hot during that time. A lot of people go to Hanoi to explore at that time at some point.
That's great. Yeah. And so the weather was, you traveled from south to north, and more or less throughout the country, it was similar weather and what you were used to in India. I think we can now start off with the journey that you actually took and what you did while you were there in Vietnam. You started off in Hanoi or Saigon. So tell us what you did when you got there.
Actually, I didn't have too much time in Saigon. I had a couple of days, but we went to a hostel. And I remember being completely flabbergasted when I was there because it was a different country. At the same time, it was very similar to back home in India, a few things. So it's a little strange being in that place. Do I understand the place or not? I'm not sure.
Similar and yet not similar.
Yeah, I was really excited about the Vietnamese coffee. So I think the moment I landed into Saigon, I basically just grabbed the coffee. The first thing I did was grab a coffee. Yeah, that's still the one thing I do whenever I land into Vietnam. So yeah, a lot of coffee exploration around Saigon, Vietnam. And I did visit a few places, the post office and the historical landmarks, but I had very little time, so I couldn't really go to historical places around Saigon, which give you a perspective into the history of the Vietnam War. They are quite famous, but you need to take out a day to go there, which I didn't know before I left. So yeah, that's one thing that people should do, but I haven't really been able to do that.
Okay, so the couple of days that you were there, you were mostly exploring cafes or coffee stops and all of those things.
Yeah, I had very little time actually, probably just a day.
Okay.
I had
City.
to another place the next morning. Yeah, so we took a train to this nearby beach town called Ningvin. We were actually there just to explore a particular property. We didn't really explore the town that much. It's a beautiful ride along the coast, and that's where I got my first glimpse of the Vietnamese sea, whichever it is. And yeah, from there, we eventually moved on to Hoi An and Da Nang. So Hoi An and Da Nang, I did not know before going to Vietnam that these two would turn out so interesting. They seem like just a couple of destinations in the middle of Vietnam that you visit, but Hoi An is the first place which is really touristy, but at the same time really beautiful. It, it is this strange combination of it makes you feel like you are in this old town, and it's actually called the old town of Hoi An. These small streets where you use a bicycle to go along. There's a river flowing around. There are lanterns, street food, there's shopping, a lot of things. So yeah, Hoi An was really beautiful, and I think we spent entire evenings in that market. I again want more time there.
Just from seeing the pictures, it looks like a magical and quaint little town. That's the kind of vibe that Hoi An gives.
It's not just the pictures, because sometimes it happens that you see magical pictures of a place, but when you go there, you don't really find it that magical. But
Hmm.
Hoi An is quite the opposite. It's actually as magical as you see it in the pictures.
Good.
Quite interesting about Hoi An. It was a nice surprise, so good surprise to have. And then we went on to Da Nang. One thing that you need to know about Vietnam is very fond of its seafood. It's a coastal country at the end of the day. It's very fond of its seafood, its beef and its pork. So if you're a seafood lover, if you're a shellfish lover, you would really love Vietnam. We reached Da Nang and we just wanted to have some food on the way, and we went to this restaurant. There were about 20 different types of crabs and 20 different types of crab with hundreds of types of seafood just waiting to be prepared. It's like an Udupi in Vietnam. You get of those, you get all the seafood. I am a seafood lover, so I did enjoy that a lot, especially if we went to Da Nang. So these are all beach towns. There was a lot to explore in terms of food. That
Yeah.
even in Da Nang, we went to the night markets and had a lot of seafood, really cheap seafood. So lobsters you would get for about 1,000 rupees in India. In Vietnam, then for 200, 300 rupees.
So did you enjoy the food like that you were having along these
Yeah,
two?
amazing seafood. Yeah.
Okay. And
And
then what else did you do in Dana?
so Dana, mostly that's exploring the beaches, the night markets, the food. Then there's the Dragon Bridge, quite famous. And it has a little show. They have a little show of it. It's an experience. You should go there on a Saturday or a Sunday at 9 p.m. and it's a whole show that happens there at the Dragon Bridge. I really don't want to say more because it's an experience that people should have. Definitely, yeah, something worth doing if you're in Danang.
Okay.
And from there, we went to Hanoi. But I think I did not get to experience Hanoi that much for some reason. Maybe it was raining or something. But from Hanoi, we had a trip booked to the Halong Bay cruise. So there are different of cruises that they do on the Halong Bay, which take you to the islands. So there's 1 day, 1 night, 3 days, depending on your preferences. There are luxury cruises and party cruises. We did the luxury cruise, which was you get a nice cabin with a deck and you're cruising all day long. They give you a 5 course meal and they have some activities on board and you have fishing and cooking classes. And yeah, you have the cave exploration. So there's a lot of things to do in those 2 days. And they can also drop you to the Catba Island. So you can go there and stay there and then explore more. But the weather was not really good for that at the time I went. So I didn't get to go to Catba at that point. But the experience was highlight of the trip.
How long did you take the cruise for?
We did it for 2 day, 1 night.
And it was fun, like the activities kept you busy and
A lot of activities, a lot of things to do. And the place itself is so beautiful, just being there.
and then once you got back from the cruise, that was all for you. Like the trip ended there, or did you visit any other?
I had a couple more days in Hanoi. So Hanoi, there's the beer street. I think I spent a lot of time there. It's basically an area where it's like the party street of Hanoi,
Mm.
where people sit outside on the sidewalks with their chairs, their beers, and their seafood. Big party happening the whole time.
So does that happen during the day as well, or is it mostly for nightlife?
The evening thing mostly.
So you were in that party street while you were in Hanoi.
Yeah, the party street, a little bit of the landmarks and the cafes and all of that. Just mostly chilling, not really doing anything.
Did you go to any of the attractions also in Hanoi, or
Hanoi, actually, not that much. I don't remember why. Maybe by that point, I was just too tired.
so? What was your overall feeling after the whole trip in Vietnam?
I still felt like this was just like a basic introduction to Vietnam for me. This is like the first.
Okay.
And I came back with so many things that I want to do, but I still keep adding things to my list that I haven't done in Vietnam. There's this particular bike route in the north of Vietnam that a lot of people do. It takes you through small towns and the mountains of Vietnam. So that's something I'm looking forward to doing at some point. I came back with a longer list of things to do.
So this was just like, yeah, like you said, introduction to Vietnam, and then more to be more coming soon.
Coming soon.
When you were moving between these various towns, were you mostly taking private taxis or something? Or one spot you mentioned that you took the train. But how else were you moving between these cities?
From the south to the north, we took a few flights. And
Okay.
other than that, there are taxis which are the Grab or Gojek or something like that. Yeah, those are there. And we didn't hire a bike in Hanoi.
Flights between which destinations did you have to take?
From Ninh, Da Nang, I think. Hoi An and Da Nang have the same airport because they're closer. At airport. I think it's Da Nang airport.
You had to take a flight. And then,
Hanoi is it.
so those two destinations you took flights. And from Saigon to the first spot, you had taken a train.
That was the train.
And you were mentioning earlier how very few people in Vietnam actually speak English. So, how was it navigating that? Was it quite challenging at certain points, or were you able to manage it?
It depends on how you take it. It is challenging that you have to go to Google Translate for every conversation. But again, the people in Vietnam are very welcoming. They do make an effort to talk to you through the app. If you're not bothered by it, if it doesn't annoy you that people cannot speak English, then it's fine for you. And there's a lot of funny incidents that happened because of this as well. You just have to build up your patience.
And what about the stays that you did? In what type of accommodations were you staying in these various locations when you traveled?
Few of the accommodations were these deals that my friend had, which were really nice, really beautiful accommodations, mostly luxury accommodations. So these were, like, of course, the top notch one. And other than that, we stayed mostly at hostels and smaller hotels because on those days we were mostly just exploring outside and not really staying in. Easier to do it that way. I am very comfortable with hostels as well, so that's always a good option to go to.
Especially if you're going on a really long trip, I think it's more budget friendly to take up a
Budget
hostel.
friendly, and at the same time, you meet a lot of people at the hostels who are also traveling solo, so it
Hmm.
works out.
So when you started off, you mentioned in Saigon you were staying in a hostel.
Yeah, for a day or it was a pretty short stay.
Did you like all of your stays, or how was it in each of these destinations?
I did actually. The properties that we explored, they were absolutely out of this world, so there was no question of not liking them. And the hostels, the first hostel was fine. I don't remember much about it because we didn't spend much time. Even in Hanoi, we landed in Hanoi and then booked our flight, then booked our hostel there, hostel hotel there because we were leaving for a long day the next morning. So we just needed a place to crash. Not really much to think about in terms of the hotels because we didn't really spend much time there except just dropping our bags and
Okay.
so
So accommodations were not the focus of your stay when you were there.
yeah, mostly.
You were out and about exploring most of the time. Okay, that's great. What would be your tips for people who are planning their trip to Vietnam? What would you tell someone who's looking into going there? What destinations they should pick, or anything that they should know before they land up in Vietnam?
One thing to know about Vietnam is we might think it's a small country. It's not. So give it the same kind of credit for being a diverse place that you would to India. Probably not as diverse, but still, it's a big country and there's a lot of different things to do. So you will need time to get from one place to another. And the things in Hanoi and the things in Saigon are pretty different. Think of them as separate destinations and look into each. And then there's a lot of things to do in Vietnam that I haven't done. A lot of people don't know it because we haven't explored that much. So just research, look into what you like, and then go for that.
Instead of trying to cover everything or just go to all of the popular places I mentioned, I think one needs to spend more time researching and finding out exactly what that they want to do in this new country. Right.
There's a friend of mine in Vietnam right now doing some cave explorations, and that looks beautiful as well. I hadn't heard of this. So, what things that you keep learning about Vietnam?
Yeah. And any other tips?
If you're a vegetarian, you need to think about it because Vietnam as a country is a non vegetarian country entirely. So, it is true that a lot of places smell of non vegetarian food. If that's intolerable to you, then you're going to have a hard time because not to deter people from going there, but it's just if you can't tolerate something, then you should think about it. It's not, it's just everywhere. The smell is in the air. It's their way of life and it's not a bad thing. But
Hmm.
if you're vegetarian, sometimes you do have an issue with these things. So, something to consider.
Is it possible to find vegetarian food while in Vietnam?
Possibly. It is possible. I think it's mostly if you ask them for Buddhist food, they understand what you mean and they can point you towards vegetarian, then you'll be
Mm.
fine. On the flip side, if you are a seafood lover, if you do love shellfish and oysters and all of that, then you should definitely go to Vietnam. You should definitely visit. Then has a lot to offer for you.
That sounds pretty great. And anything about the currency or water or anything else that people should know before going?
The currency exchange you should take care of before getting to Vietnam. But I think it's possible to get the currency at the ATMs as well. That's what I do sometimes when I run out. So it's not much of an issue with the currency.
Did you always have to have cash on you, or was it possible to do digital transactions as well?
Not really for me. Some Southeast Asian countries have their own systems of digital payments. It's just that we are not linked to their systems. So
Hmm.
at the end of the day, I had to use my card and cash.
Did you pick up any souvenirs from there? Any shopping that you did that you like?
Yeah, I did. We picked up the Vietnamese hats, coffee, and we found these helmets in Vietnam. Like there's one helmet which has Pikachu ears on it, and which this pink little helmet with some cartoons on it. So these were quite interesting to see in Hanoi. There are a lot of people are wearing these things. That's what we did in Hanoi. We went searching for the best helmet. I got those from there. I still ride around in Goa with that helmet sometimes and get a lot of looks for that.
So fun, but must be cute.
Yeah, it's really cute.
That sounds pretty great. Anything else that you picked up, or anything else that you would like to highlight about your trip?
I don't. There is a lot to talk about if you sit down and talk about it. But right now, I covered most of the things at least.
Okay, no one. Yeah, I think that's pretty great. I hope that our viewers will find the information you've shared about Vietnam helpful. For sure, I've made note of the fact that one should visit with that mindset that it's a huge country and you're not going to be able to see all of it in one go. So probably multiple trips are needed to visit Vietnam. Do you plan to go again anytime soon?
Yeah, sometime I haven't really planned when, but at some point, yeah.
I hope you're able to visit again and see more, and especially like the spots that you have now made a note of that you want to sort of see again and explore in more detail. Yeah.
You also plan to go now?
And then I might, yes. So with that, we will close the session for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Aditi. It was really great to have you here.